It is now my pleasure to turn the webcast over to Jennifer Jolly. Jennifer, the floor is yours.
Welcome to today's webcast on improving sibling relationships in family businesses, featuring Otis Baskin and Dana Telford of the Family Business Consulting Group. Today's discussion is part of the family business services offered by Zions Bancorporation, a financial services company consisting of a collection of great banks that operate under unique brands across 11 western and southwestern states. Our 8 locally managed banks have dedicated relationship managers who can provide expertise to assist and support family businesses. So please let us know if you want more information about stock ownership record keeping, succession planning, exit strategies, or other topics. We have great people ready to help support your unique needs. Today, Dana and Otis will cover building an effective sibling team, easing the tension in sibling relationships, and preventing differences from dividing the family or the business. We look forward to answering the questions that you submit. I am pleased to introduce our presenters from the Family Business Consulting Group. Dr. Otis Baskin was the founding director of the Family Business Forum at the University of Memphis and is a former dean of Pepperdine University. His primary expertise is in helping business-owning families develop plans for leadership succession, development of next-generation leaders, and family ownership structures. Dana Telford specializes in succession planning, family governance, board effectiveness, and conflict management. He earned an MBA from Harvard Business School and is a third-generation member of a commercial real estate firm. We'll begin with Dana.
Thank you, Jennifer, and welcome, everyone. This is Dana. You'll hear from Otis here a little bit later. Glad to have you along for a little bit of time spent on what can be a pretty bumpy road in a sibling partnership. Our goal today really is to help you feel more comfortable if you're in a sibling relationship in your family business, and to have some real takeaways that you can start to implement to improve the relationships between you as sibling partners. It's not an easy task, certainly, and we're going to spend an hour going over different cases, and Otis and I will share with you different anecdotes that we've learned over the last number of decades dealing and working with sibling partnerships and family business owners, and talk about safeguards also for siblings, how to kind of protect that relationship inside the complexity of a family business. And we'll summarize, again, by trying to give you some real tools that you can use to improve the relationships that you've got with your sibling partners. So as we start the discussion, let's think for a second about the sibling relationship. It's the longest lasting relationship in our family organizations. So as a group of siblings, and I'll use my own sibling relationships as an example, I have a brother who's younger and 2 sisters, one who's younger than I am and one who's older than I am. We're all within about 10 years of life together. We started back in the 60s and the 70s, and so we've experienced, by and large, similar trends, similar economic realities in our family. We certainly had birth order that has complicated some piece of that, but by and large, we've experienced life at about the same time and about the same pace. We were born to a world with parents, and our parents will be gone, knock on wood, before we're gone. I know that's a weird thing to say, but the reality of time and biology is that, you know, we'll live at about the same time our parents will be gone. We have all been married and are still married and have kind of added new relationships to our lives at about the same time. We've had children, all of us, and now focus more of our time and attention every day on our children and spouses than we would on our sibling relationships. This is all very normal. That's probably similar to you. If you're younger, you can see it as a predictive model. Now, what happens in a family business where siblings are involved is kind of an interesting phenomenon if we think about it, because siblings in a normal non-family relationship separate, right, over time, and they choose their own course in life, and the resentments and kind of the normal irritants and the normal complexities of like who got to sit in the front seat or who got the best bedroom in the house, or, you know, who arguably is the favorite or least favorite of the parents, that all kind of goes away as we start to choose our own paths and separate naturally and create our own family units. So those resentments are less likely to flare up as we just have geographic distance between us. In a family firm, when there is a business, it creates kind of a different stage where the actors that were siblings continue to have time together in close proximity. And now the issues of who makes what decisions, who gets what money, who has what power, who has what responsibility become additional flare-ups and additional places for maybe some tension between siblings where there already was a bit of natural tension. So this continued closeness can kind of aggravate an already emotionally charged situation, a little bit like kind of sand in the bathing suit, I guess, to use an example, where closeness and kind of the friction of different opinions and different ideas related to money and day-to-day life and strategy and all those things can really cause some trouble. And in a worst-case scenario, this can become kind of a never-ending loop of conflicts that never really get resolved over time. And of course, that's not the goal. It's not the goal at all. Why not use in our sibling relationships these points here on the next slide about the crucial generation to the benefit of a family firm? The long history that we have as siblings with shared values, shared memories can be used to create strength going forward, can be used to create commonalities that we can rely on. Certainly there's a need for differentiation between us. We want to be different. I think that's a big part of human nature, to want to kind of forge our own path. But using the intensity of the bonds we have together, both the good and the bad, right? I mean, it's all kind of based in emotion. The best sibling teams that we see learn how to use that love and to differentiate themselves in a complementary way, to say, look, we can be different, right? If Otis and I are brothers, we can be different. He can be more wise and more analytical than I, and I can maybe have more kind of goofy energy, whatever it might be, right, to go out and develop new business and to use my own strengths to help the sibling partnership. So being able to take the differences and use them in a complementary way is something that the best sibling partnerships that we see use. We're also starting a sibling partnership in a very long and sometimes very wide shadow of the founder of our company. So let's think kind of logically about this. Sibling partners inherit a business. By and large, that's what happens. That's not a choice in most cases. In almost all cases, it is a function of birth, and in a non-family scenario, business owners, partners, voluntarily invest capital and time and resources into an ownership scenario. So it's important to remember that siblings don't start out as voluntary partners. I have two sisters and a brother and my mother in our real estate company, and I love them all, and we like to spend time together, and our kids enjoy each other. If any of us had the choice to make investment decisions together or separately, I'm not so sure that we would have all put our money together. I really am not. And I know that choosing partners is an important kind of economic decision. So we're going to talk about 4 very key specific tasks in the sibling stage of a family business, and how to improve a tough situation, how to turn it into a very positive scenario, right? Some of the very best businesses in the world of family business and in the world are sibling partnerships. The first key stage is to become an autonomous, independent team. I'll roll through these real quickly and we'll get into real detail. The second is to begin taking initiative as successors in the family business, and to kind of break out of that mold of being a child and being a little bit of a subservient type in a family organization into more of a leader and an initiative taker. The third is to put in place policies, structures, and strategies that benefit the business and the family. And then fourth is to position the next generation for success. It happens quickly, right, this next generation. So let's talk about the challenges of becoming an autonomous, independent team. So one of the things that we see so often in dealing with transitions between founder stage and sibling partners is that a key success factor in the founder stage is this kind of entrepreneurial bent, this type A, sometimes personality, this strong partnership between parents that realize in many cases they have to create business success in order to feed the kids and to be able to sustain life. Well, often they gain success by controlling the elements of their business and their relationships with customers and with employees and with suppliers. That doesn't necessarily lead logically and naturally to creating independent, autonomous children, right? Oftentimes, very entrepreneurial parents are just like the rest of us who at home are saying, look, can't we all just get along with each other? Let's not argue with each other. Let's kind of go along to get along, which flies in the face of kind of a dynamic decision-making, initiative-taking parents who are creating a business where there wasn't one and creating success where there was not success. And this can unintentionally disempower children, right? If their idea is to just go along to get along, to give up their own idea or independence in order to coalesce into a group, that might make them feel like, I don't need to make decisions for myself, or maybe I don't have the power to make decisions for myself. Another key is finding a shared purpose among siblings, particularly challenging if the founder is a strong individual. I just spent some time in Houston a couple days ago with a sibling and a cousin group together, and our first question as we started was, now that a transition has taken place and that this group is kind of firmly leading this business, why are you doing it? Why do you want to be in business together? Do you want to be in business together? What's the goal, right? To kind of calculate and calibrate the goal. So often founders and entrepreneurs, type A personalities again, have their own play that they've written script for, and they've staged it and done the lighting and done everything for it. And the kids, as they come along, are characters in that play. So one way that we like to really set it up with sibling groups is to say, you write the play now. What is this play? Is it your play or is it somebody else's play? Are you a lead in it or are you a supporting character? And what kind of a person are you? And what's the main theme of this? Right? Where are we going? And this also leads to really establishing credibility as business leaders and business owners. My 15-year-old son and I watched an old movie called Tommy Boy, a very kind of funny Chris Farley comedy from years back, but it's based in the notion that the next generation of a family business has no credibility. It takes 7 or 8 years to get through undergraduate degree, et cetera, and kind of makes fun of that, but then also follows this character Tommy as he has to react to the tragedy of losing his father and kind of growing up. And when you think about growing up in a family business, it does mean becoming credible. And a big part of gaining credibility that we see in our work is believing enough in yourself that you are credible, that you're not there simply because you were born, but that you're there because you've earned your stripes, you've gone through the machinations of growth in a professional career, and you're able to lead and to gain the credibility and the trust of the people that rely on your decision-making as you move forward. Also, there are history and dynamics that have lasting influence that can affect trust inside of a business. My older sister is someone that I trust absolutely, but I still to this day remember a game of Monopoly in the backyard of a house in El Toro, California, where I'm still pretty sure that she may have cheated to win, right? And we talk together and I think about that. And if I don't consciously say to myself, look, she may have cheated, she may not have cheated, it doesn't even matter. I mean, we were kids, and now she's someone that I trust implicitly. But moving beyond them and allowing for each other to become adults and to develop and to become more trustworthy in terms of capability and in terms of character are so important. And that's the last point before we move on to point 2, is just renegotiating these relationships. You know, taking time to say, who are you? You might have been, you might have slept till 2 p.m., right, when you were a teenager, but so did I sometimes, right? I mean, all of us as teenagers did things that, you know, luckily our kids don't know, but we all have developed into different people, and finding that kind of norm for relating to each other as adults is so important in a sibling team. And finally, you know, building alignment and shared meeting. I talked briefly about that, but that's so important. If you're in a sibling team and you can't say to each other, here's why we're doing this, what's the driving purpose for this ongoing business entity, that's important, and you need to start there. And learning together, learning the business, learning teamwork, learning about family business dynamics, and then investing in teamwork strategies and how to overcome some of the challenges are all really terrific uses of your time and your energy together as you build your sibling partnership. Otis, why don't you take on number 2?
Taking the initiatives as successors is a tremendous challenge, as Dana mentioned, because it often means stepping up into a role that you have respectfully and consistently regarded as your parents. And yet, if you're going to achieve their dream of this great blessing of a family business continuing to be a blessing to their family for generations, you as a group of siblings have to step in and take on that role. And it's a difficult thing sometimes for both generations to do and to allow it to happen. So let's take a look at the slide about challenges. I think that that's really important to keep in mind. There are some significant challenges to you as successors. First of all, it's understanding that you're practically adopting your parents' baby. That's really what this amounts to. Your parents worked hard to create this. They did it, as I often told you, for you, with you in mind, all of those things, but nevertheless, it is theirs. And you have to adopt it. But, you know, when you adopt a child, make it your own, you take responsibility for it too. So there are expectations of growth that are implied as generations transition, but there's sometimes the expectation, or at least a pressure, a felt pressure, to leave well enough alone. But you have to balance these as the successors, as a sibling team taking on this new responsibility. And so it's important to be clear on who and how leadership tasks will be implemented, because one of the most destructive things that can happen in a sibling team is misalignment and competition over leadership. There are plenty of leadership opportunities to go around. Acknowledging them, understanding them, and planning for them is a major key. Looking further at the challenges that successors experience as they take initiative, I'd like to share with you the story of one of my clients, a wonderful family that did this very successfully, but they had their challenges in making it happen. There were 4 siblings of a very entrepreneurial father. All 4 of them were bright people. They all had good quality educational backgrounds, but they were different from their father and from each other. There were 3 sons and 1 daughter. 2 sons worked in the business. The youngest son and the daughter did not work in the business. The youngest son was much more interested in philanthropic things. The daughter was much more interested in investments and the long-term future of her family's wealth. The oldest son was, much like his father, an engineer who focused greatly on detail. And the second son was really kind of a visionary that could see the changing patterns. Their father went through a long process of succession planning and made the second son the president to succeed him. And it was a good decision, but it didn't happen easily. So as they worked through some of these challenges, I think they began to learn how to work together and to be successful together. So for example, deciding how day-to-day management decisions will be made was a big issue for them, because all four of these children had literally grown up in the business. Now, their brother was the president. Their oldest brother was a vice president in charge of manufacturing. And they had specific roles. But everyone in any leadership position in the business knew the other two kids. And every time they were present at the office, everyone wanted to talk to them, to catch up with them, etc. They had to learn that if they were not day-to-day working in the business, if they didn't have formal responsibilities in the business, it was important for them to be supportive of their two brothers who did, and important for them not to speak out of turn about things that might not be productive within the business environment. They also had to learn that asking simple questions, innocent questions, could sometimes be perceived by people who were not members of the family but had responsibility in the business as direct commands, and could really cause a lot of problems. So that learning curve had to occur in order for these four siblings to be successful together. Also, understanding that it was important for them to help all stakeholders differentiate between these ownership and management roles. Their mother and father had to be able to do that in ways they had never needed to do before. And as they worked on that, they had to help key non-family executives understand that they were working on that as well. Keeping siblings who are not working in the business up to speed, though, is also an important issue. It's very easy for those who are there every day to just assume everyone else knows as much as they do, or sometimes adopt a philosophy that the founder of the business may have had of keeping things close to the vest. Well, keeping things close to the vest can be very good in terms of the competitive environment of your business, but it can be a recipe for disaster if 50% of the ownership of your business is kept in the dark. So you have to be able to reach out to those siblings who are not working in the business and make sure they're up to speed. Finally, I think one of the things that helped these four siblings and their parents to be successful in this transition process was setting up governance structures that would really help them in this new reality of owners. You know, they needed to be able to create governance that allowed all four owners of the business in the next generation, these four siblings, to have an appropriate voice and yet recognize the role of management. I think the key to this happening for this family was that their father, who never needed a board of directors and never actually had a real board meeting while he was running the company, nevertheless, their father accepted that their generation, the sibling generation, would need a board of directors. And he agreed to support the siblings as they formed that board and brought it into being with independent directors, people who were not related to them, were brought to that board for their expertise in business and the guidance they could provide. And this wise father finally said to me at one point in this transition, you know, the board of directors is really taking my place, and I'm glad to see that. That means that the advice and the counsel, the wisdom that everyone has relied on me for is now going to reside in a group that I have faith in and confidence in. It was really important that they were able to do that with their father and their mother participating. But even if that hadn't been the case, it would have been important for the siblings to be able to have this larger discussion group, this truly fiduciary board that is working in the interest of everyone else. So further solutions for taking the initiatives as successors comes down to keeping communication lines open with parents as to their vision for the future of the company. You know, this is a shared vision and it needs to evolve, but it needs to evolve openly in discussions, not as some kind of revolution, but really an evolution. Also, getting outside help to determine leadership designations, tasks that need to be done, configurations of the business, and support structures is really critical. You know, advisors, outside advisors, independent directors that I've already talked about, all can help with this. And build into that process broad consensus that limits potential leadership squabbles in the future. Understanding that a process for building consensus is what's necessary, not just simple voting. The worst mistakes I've seen in that regard are when a major decision, or sometimes even a minor one, is to be made and people immediately call for a vote. Well, that just divides the sibling team, and it creates losers and winners in any of these things. Instead, a process that makes sure everyone is on board before a final vote would be taken can build consensus so people understand each other and understand why a particular decision has been made. Also, education, as Dana mentioned earlier, is critical as a solution for taking initiative. Educating yourselves about the potential growth opportunities in your industry is critical because you as an ownership team need to be prepared to understand management's recommendations and participate in decisions as owners about the future of your business. So you can't just leave it to those who are working in the business. You must educate yourself to make sure you're ready to participate where you're needed and where you really are appropriately able to make a difference for everyone that's in your business. Now, that means that management has the responsibility to share information, but it also means that you have the responsibility to seek information. So learn to build effective strategic plans together that help to determine the paths for growth that also maintain the core culture of your business. Those two things need to go together. And I see it often dividing sibling teams because they haven't openly talked about both. But building these strategies for growth, because that is almost always necessary, needs to also be done within a recognition, a shared meaning of the culture of your business. Long-term success may often require really reinventing the organization. But that can be done as long as you have the appropriate communication strategies to do that. So meet with your family on a regular basis to establish healthy communication. And that regular basis is as often as possible to get everyone's participation. Meeting too often with some folks who aren't able to be there can really damage trust because they don't know what discussions have gone on without them. So working to have a number of meetings where everyone can be there is really how you build communication. Dana, why don't you take us to the next strategy for the sibling stage?
Thanks, Otis. Why don't I take a minute just to review also. So we've got these 4 key tasks that we're talking about. First is becoming an autonomous, independent team. And then Otis has just talked about taking the initiative as successors. You know, one question we get asked a lot by sibling groups or even cousin groups that contact us and say, what if our parents or fathers and mothers don't want to be involved in a succession planning process? And that's a tough question because, you know, as children, we want to please our parents, but at some point we need to focus on, you know, the health of the business, the health of the new partnership that eventually is going to be the kind of the MO. And so best case scenario is to have them involved and to have their blessing of a succession planning process. You know, a lesser scenario, not ideal, is to have their blessing but not their involvement. And then kind of a worst case scenario, but still one that's feasible, is to not have their blessing, but for the sibling or the cousin group to say, look, this is eventually, we're all going to be sitting around a table eventually. We might as well start to get better at communicating with each other around these difficult topics. So now I'm going to talk about putting in place policies and structures, strategies that benefit both the business and the family, and then Otis is going to talk with us about the 4th point about positioning the next generation for success.
And
so
Dana,
why?
As
Please.
we move into that topic, we have a question asking if you can briefly touch on how to successfully work with a non-family member on the executive team when they're concerned that decisions they should be part of are happening at the family dinner table and not at the business with the non-executive.
Yeah, it's a great question. Where if a non-family executive is concerned that decisions that are being made around the dinner table really should be being made around a boardroom table or a management team table. Is that the question?
That's exactly it.
Okay. I think one big part of it first, and love to hear Otis's thoughts as well, is to say from the start, what are the decisions that fall in the purview of the family? What are the decisions and responsibilities that are the responsibility of the owners group? And what are the business decisions and how do we keep track of them? So Otis and I many times have developed what we would call kind of an authority or decision-making matrix that helps the family see, you know, these kind of major decision points, whether it's deciding on a strategic plan or deciding on a buyout of a shareholder or buying a company, and saying who really has, first of all, input into that decision, right? It needs to come from certain parts in the organization, but ultimately then, and the most important part, is who gets to decide or who's responsible for deciding on that, and sharing that decision-making matrix with key executives, family members, owners, board members, so that everybody can see. You know, I guess there's a risk, Jennifer, in that question, that the non-family manager is incorrect, right? That maybe the decisions that are being made in the family are family decisions. So starting out with saying who does what and what do we decide together and what gets decided where is an important point. Otis, do you have anything else to add to it?
Well, I think that's exactly right. It's really important to separate these roles for management, for owners, and for family at this generational transition, recognizing that all 3 of those roles have been tightly defined in the founder of the business before. And so now it's critical to separate them, and it's absolutely natural that key non-family executives are going to be confused about this. So bringing them along, helping them to see the process you're going through to separate those and to create the spheres of authority and decision-making is really important.
It's a great question, by the way, and we run into so many key non-family managers who almost have become a part of the family. I mean, they're so trusted and they've been so integral into the success of the business that line gets blurred. So we want to reemphasize that. It's saying, okay, we're going into a new situation, for instance, with a sibling group. You know, mom and dad weren't in a sibling partnership. So there's part of it that they can't teach to us, right? They have their MO. And as Otis said, all those decisions and all the meetings and all the information is kind of swirling around in somebody's head, and they've been very successful at kind of sorting through it. But now that there are multiple owners, it's time to formalize and kind of separate these decisions into the appropriate place. You know, it leads perfectly into this question, you know, is why don't policies and structures and strategies that benefit the business and the family get integrated? And for one thing, it's the fear of change. I mean, I think that's natural in all of us. If we're comfortable with what we did yesterday, we'd rather do it again today than do something differently. Often, too, entrepreneurs talk about, formalizing, professionalizing the business. It never was that way, right? We never needed to have all these rules and all these meetings. We sit in meetings all the time. Well, the reality is that the business has changed. The landscape has changed. Competitors have changed. And most importantly, the ownership group has changed. And now it's more than one. And that means governance and meetings and structure and setting expectations. And then the third point there, coping with differing levels of knowledge, commitment, ability, and interest, how to build consensus with diverse viewpoints. Right? If in a big sibling group, the chances are good that some members of that sibling group are not going to have business knowledge and knowledge about shareholders' responsibilities. So how to build consensus there is so important. And it's so important to have good leadership and to have good advice as leaders kind of develop in that area. One strategy that we use pretty consistently is to over-communicate. Right? I mean, to talk and to ask questions and to get people much more comfortable with saying, hey, you know, this is something that I don't understand. I need some more time on this. And Otis brought up a really good point, which is, you know, asking for help and kind of getting help yourself are also two different questions. Taking the initiative to find out what you don't know that you need to know in a sibling partnership is really important. Not wanting growth, like again, keep it the way it's always been, not wanting to change, not taking on risk. You know, humans, basically we develop and go through stages in life that are pretty predictable. And it's predictable that a 65 to 70-year-old founder who has maybe gained a lot of business and revenue and wealth and then lost it and then gained it back would be pretty interested in security at that stage in life. So thinking through how different owners perceive risk, walking through that discussion, what's the right amount of risk that we're willing to take? What about liquidity? If you don't want to be involved in a business that's growing, maybe you could be bought out. Is that so bad, right? In a partnership that you didn't choose to be in? Also, the arrival, the needs, and expectations of spouses is so important. Spouses and in-laws in family businesses are incredibly, incredibly important. We always hear, but what if there's a divorce? Well, what you do in creating policies and structures and strategies is probably not going to decrease the chances of divorce in family business systems, but it certainly will help when something like that takes place. So take the time to think through the what ifs and the whens and to create expectations, and really important here, include spouses and in-laws appropriately in these discussions. None of us by nature like feeling excluded. If we're excluded, we feel that we're not trusted or we feel like we're being judged as being not capable of handling information. So it's so important to treat people with respect, include them appropriately, not giving them more information and confidential information than they need or should have, but treating them the way that we would want to be treated in their shoes is really important. And then a reluctance to creating policies that might challenge outdated practices by family members. Again, back to that, but we've always done it differently, and it's continued to work, is a strong argument, and sometimes very hard to get over. I've done work with a family recently where they have asked for help from consultants, and they've actually fired a couple of consultants. And as we had a very honest conversation a number of weeks ago about how unique and different they were and why would they want to make some of the changes that I was recommending, I made the point as diplomatically as possible, look, I'm here and you've hired me to be here and you're paying me to be here, and you've hired 2 other consultants and then have fired them, and the message has been pretty similar. So if it's worked in the past, it's not working now. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this tension around what are we going to do in the future. So change is difficult, but change is important as dynamics change and owners change. Start by identifying policies to which everyone can agree. And I'll make a kind of a strong opinionated statement here about the first policy that you should make together, and that is, how are we going to communicate with each other? What do we expect of each other? What are the rules? Usually those rules, as you think through them and talk through them openly, come down to be respectful, don't interrupt each other, be on time to meetings, have agendas, professionalize what we're doing. There is often also the dynamic in a group that's trying to make these policies in a sibling group where one is much more verbal than the others, or maybe 2 are much more verbal and vocal than the others. So having a policy that says everyone's opinion matters and everyone needs to speak up, even if in speaking up they say I have no comment, they're given the chance, the space is made for them to talk about their thoughts. And as you get that kind of, that first policy under the belt of, hey, here's how we're going to communicate, here's what we expect, what it does is pave the way for getting into more challenging discussions, because you can hold each other to the rules, right? It's very different for me to say to my brother or my sisters, be quiet, you're talking too much, or don't interrupt me, you always have interrupted me, something like that. Much easier to say, look, we all agreed to these rules, you agreed to them, I agreed to them, how are we doing? Are we sticking to the rules? And giving everybody the chance to say, no, we need to interrupt each other less, or we need to listen more, or we need to be more respectful. And then talk openly with family members about the advantages of growing the business. So simple economics, it shows loudly and clearly that families, by and large, grow much, much faster than the businesses that they own. If my siblings and I were raised in a household that, cost whatever, say $100,000 a year, and we all, for some magical reason, believe that that's a good amount of money, to have, and that we want to have that same amount of money in our household. Well, if we're relying on a family business as the source of that, it's pretty clear that that $100,000 need for a household is going to turn into $500,000 pretty quickly if there's 5 different groups, including parents, still involved, and it goes on from there. So doing some simple math and talking about growth and how it's needed and what the advantages of it are is really, really important. We've also found, too, that identifying a growth goal, identifying something kind of out on the horizon, is a solidifying agent in a dynamic group of siblings to say, look, we're all rowing in this direction, right? This is where we're going. It's growth. It might be a new business. It might be, a new section of market that we're going after. And it's a solidifying and a unifying agent. And then last couple of points on the structure and policy piece, be intentional about how newly added family members are incorporated into the family. So many of our clients will have kind of a welcome moment in maybe an annual meeting where someone who has come of age or has graduated from high school, has maybe graduated from college, that they're highlighted and that they're kind of shown as now someone who's gotten through the turbulent adolescent times, and they're on the stage now, and we'll see what they do, but they're here, and to talk with them about possibilities. And then also organizing your business and communicating with your employees and your customers in some cases about what you're doing, right? So that they have a sense of stability and being valued. I mean, really, as human beings, we value predictability. We try and predict the weather. We try and predict stock prices, oil prices, commodities prices. We try and predict how people will behave. So anything that we can do as leaders in our family business systems to say in an open way, look, here's what we're doing. We've made these decisions. We're trying to make these decisions. They're complicated, but we're working together. We want to be in this business forever. We want you to feel comfortable here. Work hard. That just goes so far and is so helpful to employee groups as they're trying to see their own risk in some sort of a transition between generations. And that brings us to the fourth key task for sibling stages.
Thanks, Dana. You know, I think that it is important, going back just a moment, to really be very intentional about adding new family members, and that applies to spouses as well. When you think about it, spouses, in-laws, are the only folks we actually invite into our families. The rest just happen to us. And, you know, I just share with everyone that I met Dana's brother. We had a nice conversation, and Dana, he was really clear that if he was forced to choose between you or your wife in terms of keeping someone in the family, you might be in trouble. I don't know, but just pass that along. Well, it's really important, though, to position the next generation for success. Now, you may look at that and say, oh, my goodness, we're just trying to figure out what we're doing right now. But as you're doing that, you need to think about how it's going to work for the next generation. Generation skipping is a philosophy that you often hear associated with tax planning, but it's very important really in everything we do in family businesses as we move forward. Looking forward to the next generation is that long-term vision that makes family businesses so successful. So some of these challenges that we all face in terms of positioning the next generation for success include sibling rivalry. There really is a choice between sibling rivalry or sibling revelry. You can choose to define yourself by differences, or you can choose to celebrate those differences and the fact that you are together in spite of them. So looking at the whole G2 transition, understanding that parental allegiance in G3 is really critical, but that even harmonious siblings may have problems when children come into the picture. And one example of that, a family that I worked with 6 siblings, 3 of them were sons and 3 of them were daughters, just evenly divided. Early on, they said to me, well, the girls really have no interest in the business, don't want anything to do with all of this. But as we worked along, the oldest daughter had the first grandchild, and suddenly her point of view changed. Because now, while she might not want anything to do with the business, she wanted her son to have the opportunities that her brothers had in the family business. So understanding that as your family progresses and grows, perspectives change, and you shouldn't set these policies in stone too early in the development of the family. Also, understanding the impact of age spread and numbers of children in the third generation is going to be very critical. In the sibling generation, everything can be divided pretty equally, But by generation 3, that isn't possible. There will be a balance of power depending on how many children each of the siblings have, because in those branches that are natural coming out of generation 2, you will see then ownership differences in terms of individual ownership simply based on estate planning. Access to opportunities in the business can also be affected by age differences. You could just call this the first mover advantage, but it's something to think about that the oldest cousin in generation 3 may have advantages simply by joining the business sooner over other cousins, unless that's something that has been planned for. And family culture and norms may often resist needed changes. Dana's talked about that, but don't let the fact that we've always done it this way prevent you from embracing the importance of change in order to continue the great blessing that's been passed along to your care. Make sure you're accepting of the need for change. As we move to the next slide.
Otis,
sure.
as you're moving on to that, or maybe after you finish this next slide, one of the questions we have is, when does it make sense to look at all of those things and take them into consideration, maybe say it makes more sense to sell rather than to try and do that transition? So can you talk a little bit at some point about making that determination?
Well, yes, I can, and maybe this is just a good time to stop and do that. You know, the decision to sell should be based upon our interest in continuing to be owners and the viability of the business itself within the industry in which we exist. So if we want to continue to be owners together, that's a positive step. But making that decision together is really critical. It shouldn't just be assumed, and it shouldn't be dictated that you will own this business. No one should be forced to own something they don't want to own. Mm-hmm. But also then, looking at the viability of the business and being realistic, you haven't honored your father's legacy if all you do is ride a dying horse down. So there may be an important point to harvest those resources and redeploy them in some way that benefits your family.
If I can interject there, Otis, right, I just had a similar conversation again with a group of siblings where the question was asked, is this still a good business to be in? And to engage everyone in that conversation. And one of the points was made as we sat there, you know, the pager business used to be a fabulous business. The payphone business used to be a fabulous business. The Blockbuster and Hollywood Video used to be a fabulous business, but they're gone. And asking that question on a regular basis, I think, is important. Following it up then with, are we the right ones to own the business? Are we the best owners of this business is a second really important question.
Right. Well, assuming that you are, there are some really critical things that you need to think about as a sibling team. First of all, you should recognize that the systems that you had as siblings will not be adequate to the needs of cousins. So you need to begin that planning process for cousins. You need to invest time to put updated structures and policies in place well before they're needed. Siblings have ways of making decisions together. They work things out over time in ways that cousins cannot. Cousins need more structure, and it goes much easier for them if the siblings invest in that process ahead of time. Keep your sibling rivalry to yourself. You know, there may be those things, as Dana mentioned, that you remember and wonder about in your family. It's not productive to talk about them. It's not productive to pass that along. Instead, pass along the good things that really make your family strong. Focus on your values that have that have made it possible for you to be where you are today and have the blessings that you do. Invest in family meetings where stakeholders build knowledge and strong bonds together. This is a way to bring up your children together, in a sense, so they understand the bonds that they have, and it builds that ability to make decisions together and work together. Some safeguards, though, that are important to keep in mind. Spend time together away from the business as siblings and as cousins. Family meetings can be a good part of that, but don't make them all about business. Have fun together. Find ways to focus on things other than the business. Focus on your common values as a family. Develop common interests that help you to do that. And visit other sibling businesses together. Get out there and meet some others who are going through the similar things. You'll be strengthened by that process. Outside members of your board of directors are very critical to helping you build trust, maintain trust over time, and create fair practices and processes that everyone can be comfortable with, and have those appropriate proactive policies that Dana just talked about. So some preconditions for success include a method for future compensation. Equal is very often the case at the sibling stage, but equal is almost never fair, and it cannot work for the third generation. There are too many differences, too much of a spread in ages. It just simply doesn't continue on. So begin to put in place ways to compensate people for their ownership that are appropriate, ways to compensate people for the jobs they do in the business that are appropriate and industry supported. Completed known estate plans. In other words, share those critical details that affect everyone else. It's not just yours to do with as you will, because what you do with your share of your business affects everyone else, and you need to work together on that. Participation agreements, who's going to be employed in the business and not, really needs to be discussed and agreed to, with this one important question in mind: what will the business need? Not what are my rights, but what the business will need to benefit us all. Familiarity and comfort with outside directors and key advisors is important for everyone. So make sure you have that communication and that contact, and consensus on the future of key non-family executives. As you're going through this process, remember that those key individuals are watching and wondering what it means for them. You need to bring them into the process where it's appropriate, make sure they understand what's going on. So we're going to leave you with some preconditions for success that I think can help you as you focus on them. A shared sense of purpose makes a huge difference, and working toward that. Liquidity and exit plans that are finalized among you are also very important. Independent outside board members can help with most decisions because they are someone that doesn't have any stake except to give you the best possible advice. Family code of conduct, where we deliberately say how we want to treat each other. That's a great asset to pass along to the next generation as well. Proven success at conflict resolution. We don't avoid conflict. We don't sweep it under the rug. We have a way to deal with it that we can all be confident about. Experience with open disclosure about money, gifts, compensation, and parental support. All those things that impact us all. Your salary in the family business is not just your business, because it's coming out of the pockets of all owners in a real sense. And so there needs to be a way to talk about these things. Remember, generosity builds trust. Secrecy destroys trust. So work hard at being generous with both information and finances. So just to recap a few key recommendations: develop your sense of team and a shared vision for a path forward. Work hard on that. Build the business and the family structures that are needed to support your particular needs. Do them in parallel. Don't focus on only one or the other. Build and keep strong channels of communication open. Work very hard at communication. Always over-communicate is the best policy. And understand that change is constant. You cannot resist it. You must deal with it and manage it. So laying the groundwork for the cousins to respond to the changes they will need can help a great deal with siblings facing their own need for change. Embrace it. Don't create fear about it. Well, it's been a great opportunity to share some of these things with you today. Dana and I appreciate very much that, and we are certainly willing to answer any questions or respond to any issues offline as well.
We thank you for your time and hope you'll join us for our next presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining. You may now disconnect. Have a good day.